So we're going to go ahead and open up the Monday, March 18th City Council meeting. I will start off with roll call, please.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Here.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Here.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Here.
Vice Mayor Beach, here, Mayor Coulson.
Here. Sorry, now we're going to take these out of order. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Donnie, I see you sitting in the back. You want to lead the Pledge of Allegiance for us tonight, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have, I take it, no request for AB 2449 remote participation. We can check that one off. Report out from closed session. We didn't have a closed session today. We simply had an open study session. All right, we have upcoming events. I'm going to kick it off with from Margaret Glomstead, our Park and Rec Director. We have the AARP Foundation Tax Aid, taking the stress out of tax time with IRS certified tax preparation, and it is all free. And I do not believe you have to be a member of AARP. You can come. It's just their community service. This is available to all members of our community, not just to older adults. Appointments are available from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Tuesdays through April 9th at the Burlingame Community Center. To make an appointment, you can just call our number 650-558-7300 or visit the front desk at the Burlingame Community Center. The next Kids Night Out is Friday, April 12th from 6 to 9 p.m. You can sign up through the Park and Rec. The Bayside Dog Park will be closed for maintenance work on Thursday, March 21st from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Cuernavaca Field will be closed for athletic turf renovations starting April 1 and will reopen in October of 2024. We are also having Live Play, in the new Live Play Burlingame is out, and summer registration will be open to residents on April 3rd at 8 a.m. and non-residents on April 8th at 8 a.m. And lastly, if anyone has had a chance to go over to the community center, there is a little art installation that we put up with in conjunction with Art Attack, and it is themed Women Painting Women for Women's History Month, and it will be up there through the middle of April. It's very fun. It's really colorful, really bright, and the artists are pretty much local artists from the ages of 14 on up, and it made just a beautiful collage. It's right when you walk in the front door, go down to the Sequoia Room. It's on the right-hand side. I invite everyone to come and stop by and take a look. That is our Park and Rec announcements. We also have library announcements. To all gardeners, spring is in the air and the library has free packets of seeds ready for planting. The library's seed library is offering you 4 free packets of seeds for easy pickup at either the main library or the Easton branch. There are more than 50 varieties to choose from, including California wildflowers, vegetables, and herbs. See the library website for the online order form. Secondly, the library is hosting a virtual screening of Matter of Mind, My Parkinson's. This hour-long documentary is about a mother, an optician, and a cartoonist and how each navigates their lives with determination in the face of Parkinson's disease. Presented tomorrow, Tuesday, March 19th at 6 p.m. Registration is required, and you can get the link at the library event page. Third, Farm to Fork with the Seasons on Induction Cooktop. Chef Laura Steck teaches at the farmers market around the Bay, and this class highlights favorite market recipes and the best of what's in season. She'll cook a seasonal menu as she demonstrates how easy it is to use the climate-friendly induction cooktop. This is Thursday, March 28th at 6:30 p.m. in the Lane Room. With that, does anyone else have any additional events? Okay. The only other thing I'll remind everyone is if you all want to have your open houses at all, your open council conversations with council, just let either Megan or Lisa, or for the
Actually, Jeremy is working on.
oh, excuse me, Megan or Jeremy, if you want to schedule something around here, or you can work with Brad in the library or Margaret in Park and Rec. Do you have one scheduled?
I do. It's going to be on Tuesday, the 26th at 5 PM at the Magnolia Room in the Community Center. Is that right? So thank you.
Perfect.
Any-
Yeah, great. So if you
Yep.
want to, anyone who wants to, you can, there'll be conversation with the vice mayor. She'll be hosting it in March. So I think we've managed to get one or two in every single month, which has been great so far. I'll probably do one that week as well. I haven't set it up quite yet, but I will. Just reminding anyone else who's interested, it's a great way for the public to drop in. You do not have to live in anyone's district. You can just come regardless and just, ask any questions. And they've been really fun. I believe you had a good time at yours.
I definitely did. Yeah. And I learned a lot.
Yeah. So it's a really nice way to do it. So if you want to put one on the calendar, great. And we'll work with Jeremy to make sure that's in the e-news for you. Okay. Okay. Fantastic. With that, we will move on to our next agenda item, which is presentations. We have a review of the city's other post-employee benefits, OPEB, retiree health care liabilities staff report, and we'll have Helen, Director Hugh Scott.
Okay, good evening, council member. As you might remember, we had a part one of presentation for retirement benefit plan back in January 16th. Today, before tonight, we have part two of the presentation is talk about other post-employment benefit, which is healthcare, retiree health plan valuation, which is also called OPEB. Tonight, we have the Doug Pryor from the Foster, and he will do the presentation over the Zoom due to some personal issues. So without further ado, I will let the Doug Pryor take the stage. Thank you. Megan, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. First of all, let me apologize because I did have a health issue 2 weeks ago, and I'm very sorry for having to back out of that last meeting. Everything's much better today, but again, my sincere apologies for that. What I wanted to cover was the June 30, 2023 actual evaluation. This is going to give you kind of an overview of the plan funded status and kind of recommendations for contributions for the next following for 25 and 26 fiscal years. If you could advance the slide. So real quick, this acronym is always kind of thrown out there, OPEB. That's other post-employment benefits and other than pensions. So it includes retiree medical, life insurance, dental vision. You have the retiree medical. Does not include defined contribution arrangements you do for your, we get into the benefit structure a few slides later. You do have a defined contribution HRA accounts for employees that are not covered under this valuation. You can advance to the next slide, please.
Megan, is it possible to turn it up a little, get the volume a little higher? Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so hopefully you can hear me better. I'll try to also speak a little louder. So the valuations, GASB 75 covers OPEB accounting. That statement requires a full actuarial valuation be prepared every 2 years. So the city is on a June 30 odd year basis for those valuations. The valuation, again, we're looking at is the June 30, 23. It's going to provide recommended contributions for 25 and 26. The timing is a little different for GASB. It will provide your GASB disclosure for 24 and 25. You could forward to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits. Eligibility, an employee needs to retire directly from the city at age 50 with 5 years of CalPERS service. They must then participate in a medical program in PEMCA. PEMCA is the CalPERS medical program that the city is participating in for both actives and retirees. And we'll kind of come back to this later. You also, and a group that's eligible, you might not think of, but is in this plan are city fire employees that were there, retired at that point in time when the city transitioned to Central County Fire back in somewhere around 2010. Could advance again. So you have a relatively complex structure, meaning you have, in terms of your OPEB benefits, you have a number of tiers with varying caps, varying by groups. So try to kind of give you a flavor for what's going on here with this table. Tier 1 are people hired in general before 2006 or 2008, as you can see there. They have relatively large caps, but even those caps for that group vary by retirement date. You then have Tier 2 hired after those dates, but then before the Tier 3 date, and those in general have a slightly lower cap. You can see there the bottom row for Tier 2 mentions the lowest dual premium. There's also a vesting schedule applied to those caps. So it's a little lower benefit for Tier 2 than Tier 1. And finally, I have Tier 3, which has what's known as the PEMCA minimum, the lowest benefit available. CalPERS with that program requires that an agency pay a minimum amount towards retiree health care. And for this year, it's $157 a month. As you can see in that last row, last column there, there's also the HRA account for those people hired, those employees hired somewhere after 2010 to 2012, which is a percent of compensation varying from about 2% to 5.5%, depending on their years of service with the city. In terms of what the premiums look like, if you go to the next slide, again, there's a number of medical programs available to employees and retirees. And you can see the plans are listed there across the row. PEMCA then charges different rates depending on whether a retiree is non-Medicare eligible or Medicare eligible. And then, of course, varying premiums depending single or two party. But just kind of don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but just briefly kind of to give you a flavor for what the premiums look like under the program. You got to go to the next slide. This then gives you all in, what's the city been paying in those premiums over the last almost 20 years. These are in millions of dollars. You can see way back in 05-06, about $1.5 million was paid for retiree premiums back then. That number is up to about $3 million as of the most recent fiscal year. And so just kind of to give you an idea what that all-in cost is for covering retiree premiums. You go to the next slide. I don't want to dig too far into the weeds, but I do want to mention there's this rather esoteric, perhaps, issue, which is known as the implied subsidy, which is it's illustrated in this table here, which is showing a premium of $1,000, the green line, which is charged regardless of age. Age is across the x-axis, and the blue line is sort of the medical utilization. So, or the cost of providing medical coverage at various ages. These are generic tables in terms of the medical cost on the blue line. But the point here is that what's really happening is, if you look at that age 64 data point, what that's saying is you're getting charged $1,000 premium. It really probably costs closer to $1,600 to cover that retiree's medical services. Where does that money come from? It comes from, if you go back to the left side, and that age 25 employee gets charged that same $1,000 premium, most of which is paid by the city. And so their cost is $400. That difference is implied to be a subsidy that's in the active premium that the city pays, that it goes towards the retiree. So I don't want to dig again too far in the weeds, but the overall, I wanted to mention this. It will be a little bit of an issue when we look at what happened with the liability. And also to give you an overall, what this is saying is it's about 15 to 20% of your OPEB costs under GASB 75 and the numbers we're looking at. So if we go forward to
Yes.
is there a question?
One quick question.
Sure.
I think this is obvious, but I don't want to not ask. And so when we look at the implied subsidy, if you went back to the, the three tiers of benefits, am I right in thinking that the folks who are in the tier one have a higher implied subsidy because they have a richer benefit than in two, and two is better than three? So this sort of
Ye-
implies that the subsidy is equal across workers, but that wouldn't be the case, would it?
Well, so what happens is the premiums are the premiums, and really what the city is paying of the retiree premium is independent of this subsidy that's going on between the active rates and the retiree rates. So if you pick again, this age 64 individual, their premium in this illustration would be $1,000. They're going to cost $1,600 in medical services. That's really kind of independent of whether you're paying that PEMCA minimum amount of $157 or you're picking up the full premium. The point is, it's the incremental cost from the $1,000 to $1,600. And where does that money come from? You're going to pay less on the cash benefit for people in tier 3, but really this implied subsidy is the same regardless of your tiers. Now, one thing I will say is, the tier 3 people, what's going to happen is they're going to be much less likely to participate than your tier 1 and tier 2 people. And so at retirement, your tier 3 people are going to be less likely to be enrolled in plans. And so there's less of an implied subsidy from that perspective, if that makes sense.
I think so. Thank you.
So let's move forward to the next slide has participant counts. So actually here you can see the breakdown on the various tiers in the upper section there for your active employees. What you see here is you have, somewhere around 70%, 160 of your 236 employees at June 30, 23 are the tier 3 at this point in time. You have a relatively high number of retirees. You can see there 287 are receiving some portion of their premium paid by the city at June 30 of 2023. So if we move forward to plan funding, CRBT, another acronym, but that's the OPEB trust that CalPERS offers. So money that the city sets aside in this trust can only be used to pay benefits for retirees under this plan. The CRBT has 3 investment strategies. The city is in the middle one there that's kind of highlighted with the darker border. You can see the long-term allocations there under strategy 2. And based on our model, our survey of outside investment advisors, we think a long-term reasonable assumption for the long-term return, on the investments is 5.75%. There's a lot of issues with respect to the CalPERS investments. I do just want to point out, for example, what you have here is you have a category of REITs. Those are unlike the pension plan that has privately held investments. The REITs here are publicly traded real estate, investments that are very different from the money that or the investments for REITs and real estate, or I should say real estate within the CalPERS pension program. If you flip forward the next slide, we have what the assets are. These are in thousands of dollars. As I said, every 2 years you have evaluation prepared. So this is showing just the asset reconciliation for 2 years. If you focus on the bottom 2 rows, really, what you see there is second to last row, as of June 30, 23, you had $28.6 million invested in this trust. The last row shows it's been a pretty tough couple years, as you're probably well aware. 21, 22, a negative 12.7% return, followed by a 3.6% return in the following year. So we're assuming a 5.75% return on the investments. This is averaging out to about negative 4.5 for the 2 years. So investments fell short of expectations since the previous study. And we'll kind of see how that impacts contributions coming up a few slides later. If you look, though, historically on the next slide, what you'll see is the city started this trust up back in 2013-14. You can see, yes, it's been there've been some fluctuations here in the returns, but as the footnote shows, on average, you've got about a 5.5% return on your money overall since the trust was initiated. So I wanted to kind of cover the assets. We'll now look at how the plans benchmark against these assets in terms of the liabilities on the following slide. And what we have here is, as I mentioned, there's been every 2 years there's a study. So we're comparing the June 30, 21 study with the June 30, 23. The 21 was prepared by a different actuarial firm than ours. The 23 numbers are our numbers. And so as you can see, there's not good news here. There's kind of a step back. If you look at the unfunded liability, second to last row, these numbers, I should say, are in thousands of dollars too. About a $14.2 million unfunded liability increased very significantly in 23 to 36.4 million. So we'll get to the reasons for that in a few slides later to help kind of explain what happened there. But what you see is the funded ratio on that last line, 68% funded, dropped down to about 44% funded. I would say, keep in mind, this is kind of 2 data points. And if you look at this kind of bigger picture historically, if you look at the following slide, what we have here is the funded status going back to really the initial study, January 2007. And the height of each bar is the actual accrued liability. The blue happens to be the liability for former employees of the city, also known as, of course, as retirees, and the green is the liability for active employees. And then the red is showing the assets, and then the bold number above that is the funded ratio of assets to actual accrued liability. So although a bit of a step back in terms of the funded ratio and status in 23, what you see is there has been significant improvement. If you go back and look back further in time, in fact, your plan is a little better funded on the funded ratio today in June 30, 2023 than it was in 2019, and going from 43 to 44%. So let's talk though about what happened here between 21 and 23, and that's on the next slide. So this is a reconciliation of the actual accrued liability, AAL, in the first column, assets, and then the difference between those, the unfunded actual accrued liability in the third column. The first row is showing what the numbers were June 30, 21. The second row is showing where we expected to be if all expectations were met and there are no assumption changes. And then what you have below there are changes that came into the current study. So, what is striking here is all the numbers essentially, unfortunately, are bad news. Even if you look at the asset column, a negative asset is, assets lower than you expected or were expected. So everything here is unfortunately going the wrong direction. And what you have in the accrued liability section there are a number of changes. That first item there is with the implicit subsidy. There's kind of a technical change there, as well as on that next row with respect to current retirees not being in Medicare plans. Those are really implied subsidy related. And so those numbers, are, certainly not hard cash, but nonetheless, there are reality in terms of accounting and how you have to report these numbers. We updated the medical trend and mortality. That's about 5.3 million. We had a slightly lower long-term expectation on returns than the previous actuary, 1.7 million. And then there's also those are the amounts that we could identify. We didn't have the data used in the previous study to really drill down on this, but we have another $5.5 million difference from the previous study. Assets, again, $5 million off the mark. So what you're looking at in terms of that unfunded liability is we expected you to be second row, far column at 11.2 million. Unfortunately, we're 25.2 million above that to get to an unfunded liability in the current study of about 36.4 million. If you go to the.
Can
oh,
we
is there-
stop for just 1 second to see if anybody
Yeah.
has questions? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, that's a
There's
lot there.
going on.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you just clarify again what, I followed you until the other demographic category,
Yeah.
0.5 million. Just help us understand what that really means.
Right. So there's a lot of changes going on between two valuations, right? You have people retiring sooner or later than expected. You have maybe more or less people terminating from the city. A lot of changes going on, including premiums being different than expected. So when we take over a case, what we do is we try to identify what we can. For example, we know that the implicit subsidy was not valued in the previous study post 65. We had the current medic. So there's certain amounts we can identify. The other demographic is kind of an all other item. When we're the actuary from on consecutive valuations, we can really drill down on that number and go, well, we could tell you, well, look, that number came from the fact that, maybe people retired earlier than expected, or you had less people leave than expected. We don't have that data, so it's kind of a big fudge factor, if you will, for lack of a better word, but it's really kind of all other changes that occurred that we could not identify.
Okay, thank you.
And can you reiterate current retirees not in Medicare plans? So that's a 5.3 million
Yeah.
delta to the wrong side, because who didn't forecast what?
Yeah, well, so what happens there is PEMCA does not require all retirees sign up for Medicare. And so when, I don't know if we want to back up to previous slides, but when you become Medicare eligible and you enroll in Medicare, your premium drops from, maybe $1,000 to close to $300 per month.
Yeah.
And what has happened here is that when we looked at the data, when we took over this case, we realized that there were a number of retirees not enrolled in a number of retirees over the age of 65 who were not enrolled in Medicare plans. And so that means really two things. It means instead of paying a $300 premium, for one of the tiers that has a high cap, instead of paying, say, a $300 premium, the city's paying a $1,000 premium. And then you also have that the implied subsidy is going to be much higher because of, if you go back to that original curve with the implied subsidy, that implied subsidy becomes quite large at the older ages.
So does that imply that the benefits we've given are just that much better than Medicare, and that's why people aren't signing up? Or is there a lack of awareness? Is this an issue that we could solve with better awareness and education of our retirees?
Yeah, unfortunately, no. This is a PEMCA policy, and the way this works is if a retiree is eligible for premium-free Medicare Part A, then PEMCA will require the retiree enroll in Medicare, and they'll get to that lower premium. If the retiree is not eligible for that premium-free Medicare Part A, PEMCA does not require a retiree enroll in the Medicare plans. So, I suppose, so you don't really have control over that. And the only, potential solution I can think of here would be to contact retirees and offer. See, the problem is that if a retiree enrolls in Medicare, then they have to pay the Part B premium. So a retiree to enroll in Medicare, although it lowers the city's cost, it means that they're going to have to pay more for their medical coverage, right? And so they don't have an incentive to enroll in Medicare unless PEMCA comes to them and says you have to. So, but potentially the only small fix would be for the city to actually contact these retirees. But the retirees are going to say, well, if I enroll in Medicare, I'm going to have to pay more. And then they would probably put it back on the city to say, would the city pay the Medicare premiums for that retiree? So it's something you could look at from that angle. But aside from that, it's not something you have direct control over.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just on that same thread, what prevents a retiree from being eligible for Medicare Part A?
Right. Yes. So the way this works is to be eligible for premium-free Medicare Part A, you need 10 years of paying in Medicare payroll taxes. Okay. Those are required for employees today, but not if they were hired before I think it's April 1 of 1986. So anyone that's been hired since then has been enrolled in Medicare as an active employee and is paying the Medicare payroll taxes along with the city. For a small group at this point in time of former employees hired before that date, they were never required to be in Medicare and never paid enough Medicare payroll taxes in to be eligible for this premium-free Medicare Part A. That makes sense?
So even if the city took a proactive stance to help subsidize the cost of Medicare Plan B, they're still not eligible to move into the premium-free Medicare Plan A?
Right. So I think, to move them into Medicare, they would have they would need to pay the Part A premium. They would need to pay the Part B premium. The Part B premium, I'm not sure about the Part A. I know the Part B premium has a late enrollment penalty, right? And so, I don't off the top of my head know the numbers, but I just know if you don't enroll when you're first eligible at 65, which a number of these individuals did not, that means that the Medicare Part B premium, which today might be 180, would be escalated significantly for your retirees who haven't been enrolled in that for 10 years or whatever the number is for these individuals.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Got it? Okay. Any other? Okay. So the only question I have is the discount rate moving from 6 to 5.75. So I think that's significantly lower than CalPERS. So this suggests that the asset allocation is more oriented toward bonds, more conservative.
It is. And, a couple things, if you recall, when we had the slide earlier that showed the 3 investment options, right? The strategy 1 is closest to the way CalPERS invests, but it's still not as aggressive as CalPERS. So it's really kind of 2 factors. One is that the returns we believe within the CRBT are going to be slightly lower than CalPERS, and then on top of that, the city is a little more conservative on the investment side by selecting that strategy 2.
The question I have is, would you recommend that we move to a more aggressive investment portfolio, risk profile?
Well, so as an actuary and not an investment advisor, what I would say about that is that, first of all, most agencies are in strategy 1, the more aggressive strategy. But with that, of course, comes more risk and more volatility, right? And so it's really kind of an agency decision in terms of taking on that additional risk. As I said, most agencies are in the strategy 1, but you're in the strategy 2. I think for strategy 1, we think the long-term return on that, I think it was on the earlier slide, but would be 6.25%. For that. Now, the other thing I would add is that you do have, in part because of the Central County fire, but also just kind of the demographics of the city, you do have a significantly larger number of retirees than most agencies. And along with that goes a larger liability. So that means that your horizon for paying these benefits is a little shorter than most agencies. And, again, don't want to step into an investment advisor role here, but, the point I'm making with respect to that is that you're going to kind of need this money sooner rather than later if you compare it to most other agencies, right? If you had very few retirees, that would be kind of a stronger, I think, argument for investing it more aggressively. But you have a lot of retirees. Now, again, if the city came to the decision they wanted to move to strategy one, having pointed out kind of what I did, I would have no qualm at all if you wanted to move to strategy one.
Ricardo, I think, or Councilman Ortiz, I think I saw.
Okay, so my thought when I was listening to that explanation and that analysis was that, yes, there's a portion of it that would be due in a short period of time, but the bulk of it will still be a long-term horizon. So I'm
Like, what are the years on that? So the average, for us, what is I know it's a closed system. But when you say that it's relatively short time horizons, 5 years. Anything
Yeah.
5 to 30 years is to me a longer time horizon.
Yeah, I'm probably speaking there in terms of horizons as an actuary thinking of 30 to 50 years and so when I say this is relatively short, I mean relatively short, kind of from the perspective of a pension plan. And so, I don't have the numbers off the, right in front of me, but we could do some projections on that. But yeah, what the duration of the portfolio, I don't have that off the top of my head. You do have, kind of a significant cash flow in the near term from, about 3.3 to maybe close to $4.5 million coming out of the trust over the next 10 to 20 years before it probably levels off from there.
Well, I guess what I would say on that is it seems like we don't have to make an adjustment, but it seems like worthy of exploration or at least consideration.
Yes.
Because I think we have a responsibility to understand what the time horizon really is. And, it's all kind of funny money, if you will, because when you drop 6 to 575 and it goes up and then you drop it, those are all just sort of they're not real numbers, they're estimates of what we might perform at. But when, this plan is not liquidating in 5 years, this plan is liquidating in 30 years, I think. Is that right, Helen?
Yeah.
Director?
One more note, the city used to be investor strategy one. I think it changed to strategic two in 2019, I believe, just recently switched that.
We changed it in 2019 because of, we were locking in gains. Is that I can't remember.
Because our trust account get grow, good, and then maybe some of the actuary evaluation, the factors using is differently, so kind of underestimated liability now, I guess, because changing actually are the factor changing now and liability getting go up. I think at that point in time, the trust performing well.
Yeah,
we are assuming.
Right. Okay. So we moved to from strategy one to strategy two.
Yes.
So we moved from the most aggressive to the moderate aggressive.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think, yes, please.
What year did we do that?
I
2019.
believe 2019.
19.
And that it probably makes sense because we were having a big a big bull markets in 18, like the returns were pretty stable. We did have a lower returns. Interest rates were at the problem right now is interest rates are so low, moving up. And I think the 10-year treasury is at 4.31 or something right now. We're talking a 5.75. So it's just something to sort of just maybe revisit at some point with audit and finance or in a study session someday down the road, but doesn't have to be done today. I just pointed out because, if we had a more aggressive return allocation over the next 20 years, that number would be higher. So that's just a plug number.
Well, and if I may, Madam Mayor, I certainly agree with where this conversation seems to be going. I mean, I think it's one thing if you believe you're managing to an $11 million unfunded liability, and it's really quite different if
100%.
hold you have a $36 million unfunded liability.
Right. You have to assume a little more, potentially a little more risk to meet that, meet that return requirement. Okay, we can maybe do that in the future. I'm sorry, please continue.
Great. So the next slide then, start looking at recommended contributions, and just a little bit of background. Contribution is you have normal cost, which is the cost of benefits accruing for active employees. And then you have a payment on that unfunded liability that we were just looking at of about $36 million. So in terms of what that boils down to for the city, if you go to the following slide, what you see here, again, each valuation covers 2 years. So we're actually including the previous study for 22 and 23. And then in the far right columns are fiscal year in 24 and 25. So for fiscal year in 24, what you see there is normal cost of $940,000. These are in thousands of dollars. Unfunded liability payment of about $3.4 million. So that's, we take that unfunded liability that we're looking at the 36 million, amortized. There's a little more behind it, but essentially it's amortizing to pay that unfunded liability off over a 13-year period. And that gets you to the $4.3 million actual determined contribution there. As you can see, that's up significantly from the previous study, about $1.9 million. We like to benchmark numbers as a percentage of payroll, so you can look at the percentage of payrolls in the last section. But if I could, this is, obviously significant cost increase. If there's any perhaps silver lining, is probably in the following slide, in the last slide I have. So the actual determined contribution there is $4.3 million. So this is a 10-year projection. If you look at the first year there for fiscal year end 25, what you see there is what you're already doing is you're paying the benefit payments to retirees. So if you look at the first row, cash benefits, you're paying $3.4 million expected to pay this year to retirees. The implied subsidy benefit is essentially a credit against that actual determined contribution. That's about $670,000. I understand that's kind of a make-believe number, but it is what it is, and it's built into the $4.3 million ADC. So what you see in that first row is by making the benefit payments to have an additional contribution to the trust of $280,000. So if you pay the retirees outside the trust, again, as you've been doing in the past, and then you contribute to the trust $280,000, that gets you to pay that full actual determined contribution and puts you on schedule to pay off the unfunded liability over a 13-year period. So, a number of times you look at the actual determined contribution, and agencies might look at that and go, wait, we have to find $4.3 million. And this is just kind of really emphasizing the point that, well, you're already paying the combined 3.4 over $4 million in fiscal year 25. And so the additional amount to pre-fund is the $280,000. Then this has a 10-year projection of that number, along with the right-hand column showing the expected progress you'd be making on that funded ratio over the 10-year period, going from a funded ratio of about 47% to 76% over the period. So a lot of obviously not good news here, but this might be it might be as much of a silver lining as there is in all these numbers, which again is that, if you continue to do what you've done in the past, which is pay the retirees outside of the trust, the incremental cost to pre-fund is $280,000. That's the last slide I had. And so with that,
I'll go ahead and open it back up to questions or comments, and then I'll take comments from members of the public. Yeah.
I have one.
Yes, please.
Can we go, I'm sorry, can we put the slides back up? I can't get my computer to work. I apologize. So can you go back a slide? Okay. So I want to make sure I understood because I got a bit lost on the last slide. If what I understood you to say is that the unfunded amortization of the ADC in 24-25 is around 3.4 million. So total cost, 4.3. But then on the next slide, you seem to say, well, you're already paying 3.3 million in cash each year. So normally when I think of paying down a liability that's growing, I'm thinking about putting more money in. I'm putting money into an investment vehicle that's going to generate returns. But I heard you to say that, no, you're just paying the cash out to the employees and benefits. I guess what I'm trying to get at is what's the delta between what we really have to pay to be responsible and what we're doing now? And maybe the answer is it's not very much. Like if you go to the next slide, so are you saying basically that the only thing we have to do to get on track is to put in 280,000 in 25? That can't be right.
That's right. If you would, but keep in mind, you're paying the benefits outside of the trust. So it would take, let's, an example of CalPERS pension system, right? They send you a bill, you pay, each year, each payroll period, you send off a check to CalPERS, right? They put that money in the trust and then they pay the retirees out of the trust, right? In theory, at some point, OPEB will work the same way, right? You're going to put money into the trust and then the trust is going to pay the benefits. But you, as a lot of agencies, because you're kind of in the sort of earlier stages of the system, you, as a lot of agencies, are not taking that money out to pay the benefits to retirees, right? But it is, you could, another way of looking at it is you could look at this and I could say, well, okay, like put $4.3 million into the trust, okay? But if you do that to pay the full ADC, what you need to do is reimburse yourself for 3.4 million in cash benefits and the $670,000 in implied subsidy. So put the $4.3 million in and then take out the almost $4 million, right, to pay the retirees.
I see. So I'm now addressing this question either to our city manager or finance director. In other words, in our budget and in our 5-year budget, we have 3.4 million already budgeted to pay retiree health. So am I right? I mean, that's the implication.
Yeah, yes, that number will be built in our internal service fund, the expenditure side, yes.
So, and that's already built in. So if you looked at the 5-year budget, those 3.5 million numbers would be in there out the next 5 years.
Yes, if we do not update with the latest number, will be incorporated when we do bring the proposed budget.
And I'll make this my
Well,
last.
one correction is it's really 4.3 is in the budget, not 3.3, right?
Will be,
Includes the implied subsidy too.
yeah, will be 3.3 plus 280 without the implied subsidy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in the budget is about 3.6.
Yes. Mhm.
So
Okay.
I'll leave it, my comments here. And I'm just so glad the mayor understands pension math better than I do. But it is, I have to say, it's weirdly, it's sort of schizophrenic to be told, you thought you owed 11 million, but actually you owe 46 million, which sounds horrible. And then to be told, but never mind, you're already paying the amount of money you're supposed to be paying, and therefore your budget won't take a 30 or $40 million hit, right? Like, I think I follow it. It's just, it was a bit of cognitive dissonance.
I take it back
Yeah.
to the, kind of to the, home loan, sort of thing again. You owe a certain amount of money on your home loan. If you have a variable rate loan, and so your interest rate goes up, now all of a sudden your payments are going to go up. So there's, the market returns, like those numbers on the right there, the funded status could, if the market takes 3 years of really bad returns, -10, -10, -20, something like that, those numbers are going to pop way up again. We could be down at 28% unfunded liability, and that could go to 60% again, all over again. It's so predicated on the market, but it's also predicated on, we have 13 years left on our amortization schedule.
Yeah, yes, this, that's my understanding too.
And once we get to 13 years, we're still going to owe money because we're not all, it's a closed system, but we'll still have people who are alive that we're paying benefits for.
Right.
It's just the system we will have technically supposedly funded it. But if, again, people live longer than we thought they were going to live, there's all kinds of factors on demographics and everything that could then could increase again the bubble. So we have sort of this moving target at the end of 13 years, and it's got a lot of fulcrums that are making it go up and down. And I think the most important thing is that we're looking at it, we're monitoring it. We have it budgeted for the next 5 years. It's a closed system, so it will, unlike the pensions, which will never go away, this will go away someday. And the point of the presentation is, this is what it's costing us to pay for employee retiree healthcare.
And sorry, I promised not to say anything, but in a way, so prior councils didn't save enough.
No,
And that's the bad news. But the good news is we have enough. Well, to put it differently, if they had saved enough, then that 3.5–4 million that we're putting every year into retiree benefits, we could spend on something else. But the reality is that debt is being paid each year as it comes due by the city because we have a healthy enough budget and reserves. Like, it goes back to why it's a good thing to have reserves.
well, and also because we have to by law,
I know, but
right?
but if earlier councils had been more thoughtful, let's say, then they would have been putting in enough money.
Yeah.
The fund would have enough and there wouldn't be an unfunded liability. Right? That's where this all starts.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the difference probably between, again, the closed and open system. And most of these things, including pensions, were never fully paid for when they were given, when they were granted. They were dollar cost averaged over time. And that's essentially how it worked. But you're right. I mean, if there was like a $60 million windfall and you gave a benefit and then you stuck it into and you immunized the portfolio and you basically said, okay, we're going to immunize the portfolio. So we have the money we owe, here's the money. When interest rates were 18.5%, you could immunize the portfolio and know it was a closed system and be done. But unfortunately, it's not what we have. But anyway, I'm going to open it up to members of the public who might have any questions or comments on this very exciting OPEB conversation. Anyone, Megan, write in? All right. I do appreciate the staff, Lisa, City Manager Goldman and Director Hugh Scott bringing this to our attention, because this is one of these sort of small, not really small, but large side financial, I always feel like it's off balance sheet financing kind of situation, like, things that were given but not paid for, but now we have to pay for. And I think the most important thing is to understand that these are very top of the line in liabilities that we owe. We have to pay these first, along with our pensions. And then, staffing and, all the other costs that go along with running a city are actually lower than all of these. And so if these are not watched and managed, they can cannibalize the rest of our budget, which is really important for us to keep this actual services that are being provided to our residents at the high quality that we have. So thank you very much for that. If there are no other questions and we have no members of the public comment, I don't think there's any direction needed. This is just informational only. Appreciate it. And we can just move on to the next items. Okay. Public comments, non-agenda. So at this point in the meeting, if there's anyone who has a public comment that's not on the agenda, can please step forward. Otherwise, we'll have you go ahead and comment when your item comes up. Okay, great. Close public comment. We have approval of the consent calendar, and I do believe Director Mertuza asked 9D, is that right? 9D to be pulled because I believe we may have a different option on this particular contract. So we're going to defer it while we find out some more information. So is there any other item that any of us would like to pull off? Any item that any member of the public would like to pull? All right. May I have a motion, please?
Madam Mayor, move to approve items 9A, B, E, F, G, H, I, and J.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Councilman Ortiz and a second by Councilman Brownrigg. All those in favor?
Aye.
Roll call.
Oh, roll call vote. Sorry, I forgot.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beach.
Yes.
Mayor Coulson.
Yes, motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. We're to item number 10, public hearings. We have none tonight, so we'll move to item 11, which is staff reports and communications, along with public comment. We have item 11A, which is the second reading of an adoption of an ordinance of the City of Burlingame amending Chapter 8.18, smoking on the Burlingame Municipal Code to allow on-site consumption of hookah, shisha, tobacco, and adding a new chapter regarding a retailer permit. We have a staff report that we've all seen and discussed. We have a proposed ordinance. We have the past minutes in the staff report. And we have Assistant City Attorney Spansale here who's handled this ordinance change. Do we have any questions or comments? And the reason this is coming back on the public agenda is because it was not a unanimous vote. So it cannot be on consent for a second reading. All right. Do we have any members of the public? Yes.
We received an email from Blythe Young from the Community Advocate, or she's the Community Advocate Director for the American Heart Association. She says, I'm writing in support of your consideration of adopting a tobacco retail license program that includes 2 annual proactive compliance and enforcement checks that match what would be included in the city/county partnership with San Mateo County. While I'm in support of the compliance standards, I also urge the city to ensure that exemptions you have included for hookah are regulated, specifically ensuring anyone that enters a hookah lounge is age verified with an ID check and confirmed to be 21 and over as per state law. I would also encourage the city to consider a cap on number of on-site consumption lounges limited to the existing number of proprietors in business today.
All right. Thank you. Any other members of the public? Yes, please come on up. Mr. Gross.
Hello, my name is Don Gross, a resident of Burlingame, small business owner, and also a member of the Chamber of Commerce. And I just was looking at this earlier today, this ordinance, and it's lengthy. However, I agree and support the vast majority of the terms in the tobacco permits, such as the flavored tobacco, no sales to anyone under 21. However, as a business owner, there are a few concerns I have. I'm concerned that I can't move my business to a new location as a new tobacco retailer permit must be more than 1,000 feet. That's over 3 football fields from youth populated area. Also concerning is the ambiguity defining previous retailer establishments and how they'll be regulated with this new overlay on the San Mateo County. I've been looking at the map of Burlingame and I can't find any business location less than 3 football fields from youth populated area. And that seems awfully restrictive. This eliminates me from moving my business and beholds me to my current land lease indefinitely. Additionally, this does not support diversity nor inclusion, which I know the city council does support. Burlingame is unique, and I would like to see it protect its rights. May I recommend perhaps that you remove the 1,000 feet restriction and allow the city of Burlingame to approve any new address so that I will be able to move my business if is necessary in the future for my growth. And also, the city council should not put a law into effect that, or an ordinance into effect that is impossible to comply with without a variance. This 1,000 feet is very restrictive. This seems like a bad deal for the city, in my opinion, just to increase the number of sting operations on law-abiding business owners and of course, increasing the fees to the county. I understand that. But at the very least, I'd like to ask the Honorable Mayor and the City Council to delay the adoption of this ordinance until a number of issues can be addressed within the business community of Burlingame. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Gross. Okay, are there any more members of the public that have comments? All right. We've heard from the public, and I think there were two questions that might need to be answered. But before I pop those in, I want to see if anyone else here has any comment or thought. Okay, so the first question that seems to have been proposed is, can we limit to the existing hookah or shisha lounges? Or I think we've allowed for the potential for one more. Is that correct?
So right now, we don't have any, since hookah was banned up until maybe today. We don't have any existing legal tobacco or hookah tobacco businesses.
Mhm.
So we know we have one that's looking to be there. So we've limited it to 2. So we have put a number on it, not just 1, but 2 within the city limits.
Okay. If, say, for example, in 6 months to a year, nobody has applied for a secondary permit on a secondary location, could we essentially close down that application period? And, or does that have to extend indefinitely?
Doesn't have to extend indefinitely, but we would have to amend the ordinance to do.
So like in 6 to 12 months, we'd have to amend the ordinance to take out the second one.
Yes.
Okay, how do people feel about that? Does that seem okay to relook at it in, say, a year? Or do you want to amend it right now and just have one? Or go ahead.
Just as a procedural issue.
Yes.
So if this is the second.
Second reading, we'd have to go back.
you have
I
to
know.
Start over again.
Okay, so maybe we don't want to start over again, but I think there's been 2 points that have been brought up. One is, at some point in the future, do we want to always leave it open for 2? Or do we want to say, look, it's been a year, we've not had a second application, a second permit. Let's go ahead and amend an ordinance at that point. And then the second question is the one on the distance of 1,000 feet. And it sounds like it's relative to, I think the defining words were
Youth populated.
youth populated areas. So Burlingame Avenue, I suppose, is a youth populated area. What defines a youth populated area?
Let me grab it for you, Madam Mayor, if you just give me 1 second here. This is a definition that was pulled directly from the San Mateo County's ordinance. But the youth populated area includes anywhere where there's a private or public school that educates children in grades kindergarten through high school, a library that is open to the public, a playground that is open to the public, a youth center, a recreation facility that's open to the public, a public or private college or university beyond the high school level, and a child care facility or preschool.
And what's barred within 1,000 feet?
Let me grab that. Councilmember Graham.
Tobacco retail.
Sorry.
Mhm.
Let's see. I mean, generally new tobacco businesses is the main thing. We have made sure that since we don't have the tobacco retailer permit that's already in place like San Mateo County does, we're allowing those who have a current registered tobacco license for an address to be essentially built into this new program. They don't have to apply.
Yeah.
If they're right next door to a childcare facility, but it's allowed, they would still be allowed to go for that permit. But as Mr. Gross stated earlier, to move that business, to get a new license, to get a new permit here,
For a new location.
for a new location, we'd not be able to. So they are very strict 1,500 foot radiuses that are in effect, but I mean, they're in effect for that reason that we're trying to make sure that we do not allow those businesses to go near these youth populated areas.
So if they're already there, they get to stay.
Yes.
But if they want to move next door, they don't get to stay.
That's true.
That doesn't seem particularly fair. But
Is it 1,000 feet or 1,500? I thought I heard you say both.
There's different, I'm trying to find the exact here. We have, for hookah tobacco, we said they can't be within 500 feet of another hookah tobacco retailer, as well as all the other permits, and we have no new tobacco retailer may be issued to authorize tobacco sales at any location within 1,000 feet of a youth populated area. So 1,000.
1,000.
And we never saw a map on what 1,000 feet does. So like, for example, we have the J lot, you go out 1,000 feet, that's 3 football fields. That pretty much eliminates all of Burlingame Avenue
Most
and Howard.
would be, and Broadway right now already has.
Think about the playgrounds
Yeah.
and
she's-
the library.
Yeah.
Bayfront.
Yeah. It would be interesting to see where that is allowed. Okay, anyone have thoughts, please?
There is one other
Yeah, please.
addition I wanted to add is that no new tobacco retailer is going to be within 500 feet of a current tobacco retailer. So that's also going to, even if we had the 1,000-foot set aside, that's still going to limit greatly where anyone else can come in. But again, these are kind of the tenets of the program.
Right.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
If I recall, we were trying to model this around the county's ordinance, right? We were trying to keep, and the idea was that if we ever decided to change, in my mind anyway, the idea was that if we ever decided to change the hookah exemption, then we can join the county program. That,
True.
okay.
And actually, San Bruno is exploring whether the county will allow hookah regulations to be built into it. So there are certain cities trying to see whether or not that program can be expanded for cities like Burlingame that are allowing hookah.
So, but back to the 1,500 feet, that is the way the county is written. Okay, so that's where we got that from.
Yes.
And I gotta say, we've had robust conversation on this topic. I don't think that, so for me I say if it doesn't work, we can revisit it, but I'm ready to push this one forward. We've been talking about this for a long time.
Yeah, I think though the difference is tonight we had, so we've had some new sort of questions brought in that came in at the last minute. So I feel responsible to address the public and the members of the public without just pushing it through. But let me ask this. So hypothetically, if somebody came to us and said, I have a business here, I want to move my business there. If it violated the ordinance, is there any process? Can they ask for a variance? Can they ask for an exemption? Can they ask us to amend again in the future?
No, we'd have to amend the ordinance.
We'd have to amend the ordinance. So we'd have to amend the ordinance to allow, okay,
But again, any location that's currently in place,
is allowed to stay.
and we'll make sure that we implement it over, not immediately, doesn't start 31 days after this passes, if it does pass. We'll make sure that we implement it in a way that allows the notice to these individual businesses so they know that this location will be the location that is set.
Okay, so what happens if someone's in the middle of buying a building right now that's within the 1,000 feet to do a business and we don't have the ordinance? It goes into effect in 30 days.
Mhm. So what we anticipate doing, and this will be partly Chief Matucci because he's going to be essentially the director of this program,
Mhm.
but we can work into when the program will take place and when it will begin. And
Okay.
That date.
On that date, that would be the date at which if somebody has their location established, then they're in the, okay.
And there will be some processing and some administration that will take a bit of time. So we anticipate there will be a couple of months before we require payment to make sure that we can educate everyone, to make sure that they
Mhm.
understand.
We also have to remove tobacco out of
Yeah.
some stores.
Yeah.
Okay. So 30 to 60 days is reasonable.
I
60
would
days,
say, yes,
60 to 90. Okay. Okay. All right. Any other questions that anybody has? Yes, please, Vice Mayor?
Just the one other question that came from the public email, as far as age 21 enforcement, that's all part of our ordinance, correct?
That is, I actually explicitly put that in there since the San Mateo County ordinance doesn't have hookah. So that's explicitly laid out in there. And anyone who violates that's a violation of the permit. So that would either be a suspension, or if there's enough violations, it would be a revocation of the permit.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, I don't like legislation that affects a ban on something that isn't explicitly a ban. Like if we wanted to debate a ban, that's one thing. But if you are effectively creating a ban but not calling it that, that just sort of offends my view of how to do good legislation. And what I'm worried about, and I have to say I hadn't focused on all the different points from which you measure 1,000 feet. That's a lot of different kinds of places. I mean, daycare and playgrounds, and I'm sure baseball fields and on and on. You know, I just wonder if there's anywhere you could open a store in Burlingame. But I also take Councilman Ortiz's point that we've talked about this for a long time and we are able to amend in the future. And so therefore, Madam Mayor, if somebody makes a motion to support this and get this into effect, because it is, the purpose of this is a good purpose, I'm going to vote to support that. But I would like to afterwards do some calculations about whether we've actually left anywhere where somebody could open up a new store, because so far the stores are not illegal, right? I mean, we had a different discussion about cannabis, and we had a very intentional discussion this council did about we don't want to have cannabis retail, and so we don't. And I was good with that. That's explicit. You have a debate, people can show up for the debate. I believe in cannabis, I don't, whatever. You know, I'm good with that. But this one worries me a little bit because I think effectively we may have made it impossible to the resident, to the comments made earlier, made it impossible to move. And that would bother me a little bit. But anyway, that's how I feel tonight. I'm going to vote to support, but I am concerned about whether this is effectively a ban. And I would like to, you know, at least
So-
keep open the idea of maybe revisiting this.
What I would love to have happen then maybe based on your comments, Councilman Brownrigg, would be in sometime in the next bit, maybe on the consent agenda, just a map or something that doesn't have to be a big discussion, but just something that we could understand. And then we can, you know, sometimes it's when something it's hard because you want to be fair to everyone and you want to be fine. But I do agree. I think until it was really pointed out what 1,000 feet does, it does create effectively a ban in all of most commercial areas. And then when you layer in parks and the community center and whatever, and you go down to, you go to the plaza. I'm just trying to think of everywhere.
Peninsula High School.
You have Peninsula High School, you have the plaza, you have the hospital. I mean, it just is, it's effectively, I'm with you. I'm effectively worried that you put in, basically you just allow people that are here and you put a ban on it. And it is legal to have a smoke shop. So, I take your position as well, which is that I'll support this because we've been working on it for the past 6 months. It's hard because we're, trying to adopt what the county has set up. And I can understand in an unincorporated county why you might have such a large, number. In a smaller, denser city like ours, it may not make sense. I think this is one of the problems of just simply adopting straight across the county. We've already seen 2 or 3 things that we didn't really realize they were doing, and we're sort of living with them. But I do think we have to be open-minded if businesses come to us, and want to make a case for their situation. I, for one, will be very open-minded to that. All right. Anyone else over here?
Yeah, I think we've been talking about it a fair bit. I think we're trying to do the right thing as it relates to a compromise that is conscious of all parties. I do think the information about the restriction in that county provision around 1,000 feet was not really discussed or known until after the first reading. Is that correct?
No, I mean, this has been briefed
No, it's been in there. I mean, it's been in there.
This hasn't been.
Time. It's
this-
just we
uh,
haven't, no one's really thought like, what does really 1,000 feet look like? And
Where would-
you plot all the spots and show me the map and what does that essentially cover?
Ma-
And, you know, with today, when we had someone bring it up for the first time, it's like, okay, yeah, that makes actually, you know, that makes sense. Like that's a huge radius. So,
And I did want to add, Madam Mayor, I think personally, after looking at where the tobacco retailers are currently located, the 500-foot within another tobacco retailer is going to be almost as restrictive as 1,000 feet from other retailers. So that's certainly something I can provide a map of, like.
maybe 500 and 1,000 just to see.
Sure, but I just did want to note that I think, for example, Broadway, I'm not sure, even if there was no youth populated area restriction, it was just the 500 feet from another tobacco retailer, that's going to be effectively.
Right, a ban
limit
on the rest.
well.
But it's not a ban because somebody can still go there. Somebody
Cool.
did open up.
Yes,
I think what Councilman Brownrigg's talking about is when you draw the concentric circles around all the places in such a wide sweeping definition by de facto, you know, clearly that one fell within, you know, was okay. So I think so long as we're open-minded about it and if it needs to come back to council, you know, for an amendment, because essentially we have banned it inadvertently,
Sounds like it.
then, you know, and we can bring it, we can put it in place for now to get going. Because I think the real issue is we need to give some resolution to the hookah place of what's going on. So if we can give resolution to that, that can move forward, people can figure it out. And then we can revisit the two issues, which is the second hookah permit and maybe in sort of compromise of taking back one of those permits, we are more flexible about a regular tobacco situation and we change the, maybe it's 250 feet. I don't know. But we'll figure that out. Okay, so do I have a motion?
So I would like to move to approve adoption of the ordinance that we've been discussing, so I don't have to read it all.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion by Councilman Ortiz, second by Councilman Brownrigg. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beach,
No.
Mayor Coulson.
Yes, and I just, I'm voting yes too, but I want to make sure, I think, Vice Mayor, you'd mentioned before, the issue was you just,
Yeah, I'm on thorough record for my objection for other reasons to this exception to our previously flavored tobacco ban. Thank you.
okay. All right, motion carries 4-1. Thank you for the extensive public comment. We really appreciate that. That's, you know, when we get feedback from the public, that's how we can sort of figure out where we need to make nuanced changes in some of this legislation. All right, with that, we'll move on to item 11B, Housing Element Annual Progress Report.
Good evening, Mayor Coulson and members of the council. I'm pleased to provide the 2023 Annual Housing Element Report. Next, please. As we do every year in March, we look at our track record from the year prior, and that involves a whole bunch of rather difficult to read spreadsheets, as you can see here. These are the templates provided to us by the state's Housing and Community Development, or HCD department. They are important because they have a lot of information, so I'm not degrading them, but they are hard to read. So hopefully I'm here to provide a little more summary than what you would glean out of looking at those sheets. Next. This sheet, although on the screen it's pretty small, this is the master summary. So that's the cliff note, so to speak, of all of those sheets put together, set up in a way that it auto-populates. You get all the numbers, provides the highlights of the year. Next, please.
Oh.
And this is probably the most impossible spreadsheet. It's called Sheet A2, Table A2. It either has to be blown up on a poster or read on a screen because it's got so much information. But that's also the beauty of it, is it's got all the information. It includes entitlements, it includes building permits, it includes units that are completed. So it's got a lot of information, but over the years, it's just grown to be this enormous giant spreadsheet. Next. So the highlights, instead of having to wade your way through the spreadsheets, is that in 2023, and this is the calendar year, so starting in January through December, 159 homes were entitled, and that means through planning commission approval generally. 839 building permits were issued, and those are 839 net new units or homes. Of those, 72 were accessory dwelling unit applications that were received, and then of those 72, 39 were issued. And actually, the way I'm stating that isn't exactly correct. In some years, the permit is submitted, and then the building permit is issued the following year. So 199 homes were completed, and that's based on certificate of occupancy.
I mean, can I clarify, when you say homes, that includes both SFD and MFD, multifamily and single family?
That's correct, yeah. So units is another word. We just thought homes is. a little-
Yeah, no, I like that. It's more inclusive language, but I just wanted to make sure that, because unfortunately, oftentimes the word home seems to refer to something someone owns,
That's right.
opposed to something rents. So I just want to make sure that the nomenclature is
Sure.
defined.
Dwellings would be another way, and
Yeah.
it's-
I think that's an excellent
between-
way.
Yeah.
Yep, no, it's very good.
Next, please. This is also a good sheet. Again, easier to see on the screen than from here, but this is also another big, let me back up for a second. So ultimately, these numbers are important, but what Housing Community Development HCD wants to see are the building permits issued. That's when they consider, when a building permit is issued, that's considered a real unit that is going to be delivered. Entitlements may or may not be delivered. So entitlements are great for defining the pipeline, but once ground is broken, that's when we feel pretty confident that there will be a unit there for a new household. So one thing that is nice, so we've just started the new housing element cycle. So it's known as RENA 6, and what that means, just for the public, RENA is the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. It's just called RENA for short. And then this is the 6th cycle since they started. Every cycle is 8 years. So we've just started. This is the first year of the new cycle. However, we were able to carry forward any new units that were completed from June 30th, 2022 forward. Those can be counted in the current cycle. They were already counted when building permits were issued, but once they're received their certificate of occupancy, we get to count them again. So we had 317 of those that had been completed between June 2022 and now, or sorry, at the end of 2023. And then in 2023, we had 839 new building permits issued. The total number that we need for this 8-year cycle, we're 1 year into it, is 3,257 units. So we've got a really good head start. We're in fact more than 35% to our goal in terms of total units. And that is with the help of those carryover units, but also just a lot of big projects breaking ground in the last year. Of those that have been issued, 204 of them, or about 18% of the total, are affordable, designated affordable to either moderate, low, or very low income households. Next, please. So just in terms of these numbers, we go through this a lot in a lot of the presentations, so I'll just kind of touch on it. But this shows the different income categories that we are looking to reach for the next 8 years with this RENA 6 cycle. So it's not just the total number of units, but ideally we fulfill the units for each of these different income categories. Those income categories are based on both the regional need for housing of the different household categories, but also the city's employment base. So it's important to be able to offer some housing opportunities to people that are working here in the community. The area median income is the benchmark that is used for defining all of these different bands of household incomes. It continues to go up in San Mateo County. In 2023, a single person occupant, the median income was 122,500. Bring that up to a 4-person household, and that's a income of 175,000.
Kevin, can I ask a question on this page, please? May I? Does anyone else have questions? Question? Okay, anyway. Yes, go ahead, Councilman Sue.
Fair to say that at market, we're progressing quite well ahead of the allocation for this current 6th cycle, but we're struggling with the affordability. Because I could look at and say, okay, over 8 years, I could multiply those numbers, say we're on track to make our number in our allocation, but we're nowhere near the number for 120% AMI, which is probably tied to the, I mean, so we have an affordability gap also in the middle, not just in low income.
Yeah, and so we're clearly overproducing and above moderate, which is over 120%. We're actually doing pretty well in the very low and low. So if you prorated that for 1 year, we're kind of about where we should be with 1 year into it.
Right.
That's a little deceiving because we've had some big projects that have kind of tipped the balance. We're not necessarily going to have that every year for 8 years. The moderate income category is a little tricky because it's very close to market, but not quite. And, in full disclosure, those units in the developments that exist, those are rather hard to rent because they are so close to market. So the 80% ones, the 50% ones, those represent a good deal for the households. It's a little harder to make the case for the 120% AMI. So that one's tricky because on the one hand, you have the state saying you need to fulfill this number of units, and yet in practice on the ground, we find those units are actually not that helpful for meeting our housing needs.
Correct.
They overlap so much with the market rate that, so we may get dinged on that, but I would say, in terms of the objectives that we stated in the housing element, it's the low and the very low that really need the most continuing attention. I feel the moderate, it's so close to market, it kind of, if you're going to pick your priorities, I'd say try to go for those lower income ones, which need a little more heavy lifting.
Yes, Councilman Broward, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just, I'm going to make an observation, which is, first of all, I think this is our report to the state, right? So we're all always within the state lexicon and so forth. I do think it's interesting to know where we are versus our general plan. And personally, I'm much more interested in our general plan and where we are versus where the community wants to go than in these artificial numbers that come out of Sacramento. Nevertheless, this is a great report. The other comment, though, I wanted to make is, I think we make a mistake in seeing ourselves as deficient in very low income arena, because that is all new construction. And it is extremely difficult to make new construction work. Where however, this council and all of it, we all want to make sure we have enough different kinds of units for different income levels. And the way I think we do that in this city is by preservation. So I think we really need to focus on preserving naturally occurring affordable housing in order to make sure we still have those units available to people who are making 80, 90, 100,000 and, and so forth, or 60, 70, 50. I mean, that's where we're going to get the RENA numbers. Now, that may not qualify, Councilman Stevenson, because of the ridiculous rules they have. But I think, at least for me, I would feel very good about a Burlingame program that tried to preserve existing affordable units and making our moral commitment to that population.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
And I'm that's where my observation was heading into, how do we protect that part? But also the reality is, if somebody has a job for 175,000, there's no market for them in Burlingame if they have a household of 4 people right now, because there's nobody developing those or protect.
You mean to buy a house?
To buy, yeah.
Right, okay. Yeah.
Or-
And
Or find a suitable rent level.
So to that point, I think it is worth looking at the existing housing stock, and particularly as it does tie into that moderate income category. So as Councilmember Brownrigg noted, so one thing that's unique with Burlingame, it does have a very large proportion of its housing stock as rental. And they tend to be, the existing buildings tend to be a little older, so they're a little below market in terms of the regional rents. And that can be helpful for accommodating, at least on the rental level, the moderate income households. The new construction, which is above moderate, if you've looked at any of the prices, they're quite pricey. But with that also takes pressure off of the older housing stock, where before maybe you would have households competing over an older apartment unit. Now there may be one household that moves into the new place, and the other household can
Right.
compete a little more fairly or a little more even-footed for that existing unit. And so there's, there is a range of income rental rates within Burlingame. The for sale, that's certainly harder. There's a big gulf between, there's a wide range of rents in Burlingame, but for sale prices are very high. And that is one place where if it was a moderate income defined for sale unit, that is much more useful than a moderate income rental unit.
so, and I'm gonna make one or two comments here, and then we'll finish your slides, and then we'll regroup and we'll open up to the public. So the issue that I have is, for example, on the Village of Burlingame, when that was run through the permitting, the AMI in San Mateo County was $100,000. So we were talking units for families making 50,000. By the time that project came on market, the AMI in San Mateo County was closer to 175,000 4-person household. So the median AMI, area median income, and so our adjusted median income. So now the problem is when the project opens, it's not for 50,000, which was kind of where we approved. It's now like the range is much different. So it's like 90 to 120,000, right? So it sort of got too pricey for the people we really wanted to live here. And we heard that. We heard back from the public, like, even though this is affordable, we've been essentially priced out of it because the AMI moved. So my question to city attorney, to our director of community development is, can we, as a city, put a policy or an ordinance or rule together that says the AMI that will be applicable to the project is the AMI at which the date at which the project was approved? Because the developer had to have been able to get financing pulled together and everything pulled together under that rental scheme. So when the AMI moved up, we all of a sudden, it created all this like robust extra profit for the affordable housing developer. And I just feel like you're using public funds. Why should you get that? Like, can we just say the rents will be deed restricted at the date at which the project is approved at that AMI at that point in time?
Good point.
Good one, yeah.
I think we can look into, one wrinkle with that is these are generally tax credit projects, so they are pinned to the AMI, and so I'm not sure how much is within our control. However, one thing I've been thinking about is, these are ranges, so the moderate income range is actually everything between 80% and 120. The low income is everything between 50 to 80. And the very low is between 30 and 50. So typically what most developers do, and you can't blame them, they're
The high end.
they go right to the top. And we find particularly with the moderate income ones, when they set the rents right at 120%, the units sit. And then we say, come on, you've got to
Lower.
go all the way down to 80. You can. So it takes a little bit of doing. And so that may be something we can look at. I don't want to promise anything, but given that it is a range and everybody kind of goes to the top of the range,
I mean, I get it. I just
You
want to
can-
see if there's any way to explore it.
But
Or if not, we
good
can take it to the state assemblywoman and state senator.
but-
Maybe change it at state level.
If I may, I think it's a really interesting insight.
Mhm.
And the other way you could try to legislate it is when the developer is coming in with their permits, they show you a pro forma and they say this 2-bedroom apartment for somebody making, it doesn't even matter what they're making, this 2-bedroom apartment is going to be $1,800 a month. And then they're only allowed sort of a COLA
For their-
from the date that they get it approved. And then it doesn't matter which, what will happen is that they used to, they thought when they did the model, they were going to have 80% moderate. Now they have 80% low. That's better. In other words, you fix the rent income because it's built on the pro forma.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Is they're getting sort of like this like free benefit bonus
yeah,
because the range, they're targeting a range, the range is moving.
yeah.
Yeah, there's certainly things we can look at. As we're grateful we now have housing assistance from staff from HART, which is a program that was put together to help jurisdictions with exactly these kinds of technical issues that we haven't had experience with, but others have. So we can check in with them on.
There's also been some discussion at the state level. I know Mia Bonta was carrying a bill to basically, we have rent control in the state of California, but it exempts affordable housing.
Hmm.
And so what's happening is affordable units are getting, because the AMIs are moving up so quickly, affordable units are getting priced out. And boy, when this topic came up at an Home for All meeting, the affordable housing developers went crazy that the rules might actually have to apply to them, which was so ironic. And, in my boat, in my world, the rules should apply to you. And, they were like, well, does it apply to the AMI or does it apply to the actual rent? And I said, it applies to the actual rent. That's the whole point. So anyway, I think there's some kind of interesting things going on that legislature is talking about. I think there's some things we could think about. And then that brings me to sort of my third sort of comment, which is back to Councilman Brownriggs, which is the Hope Fund and the notion that we really do need to preserve this housing. We need to start really figuring out how to deploy this. I think we should meet again and work on that. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. Just because the state of California won't give us RENA credit for preserving these units, I think we have to just do better than the state standard. And we have to say that we want to invest money into this, even if it doesn't give us RENA credit, because we know it's the right thing to do in this city to preserve some of the older stock and older units. So I think we should hop back on that again and, start thinking about it a little more. And then I think finally, we should relook at our condo conversion rules and laws. Right now, we don't allow condo conversions of any 20-unit apartment buildings. They are already occupied. People are living in them. The number of cars are there. I know that apartments don't have the same standards as condos in this town. Condos have more space. They usually require more parking. But if people have been living there and it's all been great in the neighborhood and the property owner wants to condominiumize or convert an existing building over it and allow it to be sold to the tenants, I think to me that seems like a very reasonable way to create more first-time homebuyer housing stock. So I just think we need to maybe relook at that that condo code. So those are just my comments. Sorry to interrupt. Please continue. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Wow.
It's good to have this as a conversation. And yeah, and that rising AMI does, we've all kind of seen it and been dismayed. So
It's really unfair.
next, please. Just to drill down a little bit more. So, kind of along what we were discussing, I think that, the categories we really want to try to focus on with those HOPE funds or what have you is the very low income and then extremely low income. That's a subset of very low income. It's not, for counting purposes, they're all combined together, but, ELI, extremely low income, is very important for Burlingame because as we've talked about before, nearly 40% of the workforce falls within that income band. And those are still good jobs, like a single person household, that's nearly 40,000. So, it just happens that because, again, the area median income is as high as it is, it puts it into this ELI category, but it's important to our local economy to be able to provide housing for the people that are working on Burlingame Avenue or in our hotels and our restaurants.
There was a
See the different numbers on.
excuse me, Kevin, there was a fascinating article in I think the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal this weekend called, and it's focused on Paris becoming the city for the Olympics. And it's like, what makes Paris Paris? And it said the billions of dollars that Parisians have worked on and invested in keeping diverse housing stock in Paris so that small business owners and bakers and school teachers can all continue to live in Paris. And that's why Paris is such a cool city. And so it's a terrific article. Look it up, or I'll try to find the link and send it out to you guys. It's a great, great article. Sorry, Kevin.
Thanks. And I bring this up and, here, the council got this memo a long time ago, but for anyone who is kind of wondering why are we trying so hard to categories, it is because it's really important to our economy and economic development to be able to accommodate the workforce. Next.
Yes, please, Vice Mayor.
I just want to comment on that last slide, if you could bring it back for everybody to pause on that 38.9% of the workforce is making $39,000 a year. So, I'm in workforce development for folks with barriers, and those are our clients every day that are thrilled to come in and make $22, $23 an hour because they were making minimum wage, working multiple jobs. And there's a lot of people in this county. There's people who live in Burlingame that are making $39,150 or less. It's very real.
Even the VLI, $65,250. My daughter's a school teacher. She makes $56,000 a year. Single person household. These are our kids. These are our people.
Yeah, so these are all great points. Last slide here is, or second to the last, just we always show this, but for anyone who wants to keep track of what is going on in Burlingame in terms of development, we have the residential applications overview that's published each month at burlingame.org/major projects. We also have a version for commercial projects. I'm not talking about it here, but that allows you to see what's happening. And then we track it, including which building permits have been issued, which building permits have been submitted. That often tells you when something's going to happen. It also separates by ownership versus rental. So there's a lot of information on there. Next, please. So we did not have a resolution attached to this, but the city council should make a motion to accept the 2023 Housing Element Annual Progress Report and authorize its transmittal to the California Governor's Office of Planning and Research, known as OPR, and the California Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, should it so desire.
I'd like to open this up. There's first of all to members of the public that might have any comments before we make a motion. Madam City Clerk, is there anyone who has sent in a comment? Okay. I know we have members of the public. This was a very lengthy discussion. If anyone has a comment, even if it's just, yes, I support it, I think you're doing a good job, we hate what you're doing, please do feel free to come to the podium. Any members of the public? Okay, or yes? Yes, please, come on up.
Andrea Papajohn. I am a resident of Burlingame, and I think you're doing a great job, and I support it and feel like the state has put a lot of pressure and requirements, and I think Burlingame has done a great job.
Thank you very much for your comment. Okay. If there are no other public comments, we can go ahead and see if there's a motion on this item. Yes, Councilman Ortiz, is that a raised hand? No?
Okay, let me just real quick. As I get to the end of my time in council, I look back at what we've done with housing, and I'm really, really, really proud of what we've done. And I thank you, Director, because your department has been great at everything. And yeah, I'm always going to look back and be really proud about how we did it as well with the general plan. And so with that, I'd like to make a motion to, what am I moving?
You're making a motion to support the, please, you want to flip that slide?
Okay, I move that we accept the Housing Element Annual Progress Report. Thank you very much.
And deliver it to HCD.
And deliver it to HCD.
Okay, we have a second?
Second.
May I make
Coun-
a quick
Yes, please.
motion?
Of course.
And along with, I share Councilman Ortiz's pride, but also great thanks to our staff for all of this reporting that you're doing to the state. It isn't, we all know, enormously time consuming, and you guys are doing a fantastic job at meeting these mandates.
I agree. I really have to say, I think it is one of the great accomplishments of this council over the last decade, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. And I thank all of you for being supportive in the face of a lot, potentially a lot of community adversarial type views on this. But I think our community has also done an incredible job of coming together and standing behind us, supporting our general plan and supporting all of the work we do. So I also thank every member of our community who stands for housing and stands for diversity and inclusion in our community. Thank you all. So with that, we have a motion and we have by Councilman Ortiz and a second by Councilman Stevenson. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson.
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beach.
Yes.
Mayor Coulson.
Yes. Thank you very much, Director Gardner, for that great hard work. And to Joe. I know Joe does a lot of work on this too, Joe Sanfilippo. All right, we have a quick item here, which is adoption of a resolution authorizing the 10th Amendment of the City Manager's Employment Agreement to provide a salary increase of 0.5, which connects her, I believe, to the other bargaining units, and longevity pay of 2.5, and approving the City of Burlingame pay rates and ranges salary schedule. Staff report, Lisa, I believe, is that you or is that?
That is Maria.
Oh, that's Maria. I'm sorry, Maria. I didn't see you there. We have the Director of Human Resources. Please, I think we can go ahead and go. I think Vice Mayor Beach is pretty up to speed on it, but she can ask questions when she gets back.
Okay, sure. So you have before you for consideration, as you mentioned, a resolution authorizing the 10th Amendment to the City Manager's Employment Agreement. This is being brought forward after a discussion in closed session on March 4th regarding a proposal to increase the city manager's salary by 0.5% and provide longevity pay in the amount of 2.5% of base pay, similar to what was received by the city department heads and unrepresented employees. In order to increase and provide the longevity pay to Ms. Goldman, who has been with the city for over 11 years, Section 5 of her employment agreement must be amended to increase the monthly salary to $24,015.23 per month, effective March 25th, 2024, and to provide the longevity pay in the amount of 2.5% effective the first full pay period of July 2024. These changes require the city manager the changes for the city manager require the city council to authorize the new salary schedule as well, that once approved will be made available to the public via the City of Burlingame's website. The new salary schedule, which is attached to the staff report, also contains the previously approved increases for various employee groups. The fiscal impact for the remainder of the fiscal year of this action is approximately $4,150. Which will be absorbed within the city manager's budget. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. Anyone have any comments or questions? Do any members of the public, did they send in questions or comments, or anyone have any comments? All right, with that, may I have a motion, please?
I happily make a motion to approve
The amendment.
increase in compensation for the city manager.
Is there a
Second.
Okay, thank you very much. I just would like to say that we do have extensive meetings on this. We look at the cost, we calculate it, we take these raises and increases very seriously. We know that they add throughout the whole city to the budget, and I just appreciate how many hours our colleagues spent analyzing, and I appreciate I do also appreciate Director Sagwasid's total amount of time that she had to spend and run many, many iterations of the budget. And thank you, Maria, for all the hard work you do. It's been, I know it's been long and hard, but you've done a great job. So with that, we'll just go ahead and take a roll call vote, Megan, please.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beach.
Yes.
Mayor Coulson.
Yes, thank you, Madam City Clerk. The motion passes unanimously 5-0. All right, item number 12, council committee and activities reports and announcements. Does anyone have anything? Yes, please. Vice Mayor Beach.
Yes, I do. I think there are three big items happening at Caltrain through the local policymakers group. And actually, maybe I'm sort of looping this into potential future agenda, basically a future presentation item. But there's some exciting things happening with Caltrain, obviously in September 2024, full electrified revenue service for passenger service is going to be implemented, but that's really going to change the service that's offered at our train stations here in Burlingame. And they've come up with fact sheets for each city for what that service vision looks like. It's really exciting stuff. Number two, they've done a lot of work on Caltrain city partnerships, basically ways cities can help drive more ridership of Caltrain. And the bottom line is, if we want to sustain and expand services for Caltrain, there's ways cities can help. And I think that conversation could really warrant a full conversation in front of the full council. And finally, another part of the major work plan, there's been a few in-person workshops, another one this past week, for the corridor-wide grade crossing strategy. Somewhat relevant in the sense for Burlingame because there's an effort to have a more coordinated approach, particularly as we advocate for regional funding for these projects. Not so much, I mean, our project is so far along, it really isn't going to be a huge game changer, except that it may inspire other cities to wait a little bit for their turn when they're less far along for advocating for major grants. But there's some really interesting work to have a more coherent strategy that impacts everybody along the rail corridor. And I think that's worth a presentation for the full council. So it's an area of passion I have, but I would, if the mayor would consider it and if the council would like, I'm glad I could give you a little update on that report, but I think some of these topics worth a half-hour presentation from Caltrain staff for all of us, and most importantly for members of the public.
I think it would be my pleasure to put that on the agenda. So why don't you and I work with the, work with the city manager, please? We'll get it on the crystal ball. And is that all right with colleagues?
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, fantastic. I know we have a lot of work. Does anyone else have any? I know we all sit on a variety of committees and there's a lot of different things going on, and I'm really appreciate sort of you highlighting that one. I think we're going to hear from Peninsula Clean Energy next meeting, so I'm not going to talk too much about what's going on there. And with that, if we are full there, we will go over, I'm just coordinating a few things here. We're going to go to future agenda items. Does anyone?
Oh, I got a big list. Big.
Yeah, we're going to have to just carry that over until
Oh.
April 30th,
Yeah.
May 1st. But Councilman Brownrigg, do you have any that you want to talk about with? Or do you want, it was the Parking and Safety Commission. We were just talking about some of the agenda items.
Right. I do know that I'm looking, first of all, I thank the mayor for arranging the study session with the Park and Rec Commission. I look forward to meeting the other commissions for the same reason. And I was hoping that when we meet with the Teaspoon Traffic and Safety Commission, we might receive an update, among other things, on some of these major projects and how we are confident that we're going to be able to address traffic impacts, because I think there's a lot of concern with some of the things that are coming online. So I was hoping that we might be able to have that as part of the agenda, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure that's
Yeah.
for agenda item.
No, it's just a little bit of format on an existing agenda, and I appreciate that. Is that all right with colleagues? Does that seem okay? I think those are two good things. Great. Perfect. Thank you very much. Does anyone else have anything? All right. Okay, if we have no future agenda items, we'll move on to item 14, acknowledgements. Does anyone have any acknowledgements? Okay, I do have one. So not often do we acknowledge people who did not live in our community, but there are occasionally people who have influenced our community in such a great way that I think it is important to acknowledge them. And so we have with us today Rabbi Dan Feeder, and we have his beautiful wife, Sandra Feeder. And they join us at a time when I know both Rabbi Feeder lost his, I believe, mother several weeks ago. So we send condolences on behalf of the city to you for that. And then just last week, Sandra lost her beloved father, Joseph, and I want to make sure I say it right. Is it Bodovitz? Bodovitz, who she was relentless about having me come over to meet him, and somehow we never did get together. But through these conversations that we had, I did learn a lot about Joe, and I thought it was appropriate just to share a little bit out about him. So Obituary is available online, and I would encourage everyone to take a look and read it. He passed on March 9th, 2004 at the age of 93 in Marin County. But what's really amazing about him is he had a high-profile career in environmental protection and public service. His contribution to California's conservation policies cannot be overstated. Reads a remembrance from the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission, where he served as executive director. I know people didn't know this, so I thought this was really important to kind of highlight. Just a little bit about his background. He went on to the same role in the California Coastal Commission, and he was served on also the State Public Utilities Commission. He was born in Oklahoma in 1930, earned his bachelor's degree at, I think it's Columbia? Northwestern. Okay, Northwestern. Sorry, it's a little blocked out here on my thing. Came out, he was in the Navy, and his service brought him out here, and he fell in love with the region. He then, I believe, went back to Columbia University in 1956. Is that correct? Right. And in 1957, he married Shirley Leone, and they settled in Mill Valley to raise their 3 children, one of which is our beloved Sandra Feeder. This is the interesting part. Joe's return to the Bay Area coincided with a blossoming effort to protect San Francisco Bay from too much landfill and development along its shore. He left the Examiner, where he had worked as a reporter, and spent 2 years at the San Francisco Planning and Urban Research, SPUR, and then was tapped for a succession of leadership roles in state government. At age 33, he was named study director of the San Francisco Bay Conservation Study Commission, created in 1964 to consider the effects of further landfill on the bay and make recommendations to the state legislature. The result was the creation of the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission, BCDC, with 35-year-old Joe as its first executive director, which is pretty darn amazing. Under Joe's leadership, BCDC proposed and then implemented rules about how much of San Francisco Bay's shoreline could be filled in and what uses were allowed on the edge of the bay. His top priority was always public access. The San Francisco Chronicle said Joe is credited by many with building the Bay Conservation and Development Commission into a nationally admired model for regional planning. In 1972, voters approved Prop 20, which applied the BCDC model to protect California's 1,100-mile coastline from overdevelopment, and Joe was named executive director of the new California Coastal Commission.
Wow.
Like, pretty amazing. There's a lot more here about the work he did when he was named in 1979 executive director of the state PUC, where he led the state's most powerful regulatory agency and a staff of 850. And then he later became the president of the California Environmental Trust. Right now, I am like absolutely kicking myself under the table that Joe and I didn't have lunch together, because he is really a legend. And I think Burlingame owes a lot to Sandra's father for protecting our bayline and helping us and setting up the policies at BCDC and the Coastal Commission. You know, they're not always easy. Sometimes we have our differences, but most certainly the result has been a great saving of the coastline and the bayline in the state of California. So I don't know if Sandra or Dan, Rabbi Feeder, you have any desire to come up and make a comment or two, but we would certainly welcome you to the microphone.
Thank you, Mayor Coulson, for honoring my dad this way and all of you for listening. My dad was a great believer in public service, and he would applaud all of you who have chosen to give your time and energy to our beautiful Burlingame community. He really was a very early advocate for protecting our natural resources here in the Bay Area. And I've always been extremely proud to be his daughter when we look out at the Bay and we see this beautiful resource that we all have and enjoy. It took a lot of effort of a lot of people. My dad was one of many who worked hard to set rules at a time when the idea that localities in a region could say no to developers and to say, no, we want to protect this water, this land. That was all new when my dad was working on it. And they then went on to apply that model to the California coast, and those public access signs you see with the little waves, that's the result of the California Coastal Commission. And my dad fervently believed that the Bay and the coast belong to the people of California, and that meant everyone. And everyone should have access to those beautiful resources. So thank you for making Dan and I and our family such a big part of Burlingame, and for protecting, as I know all of you do, the beauty we have here and all enjoy.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments?
This is so eloquent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I was around when Prop 20 was approved, and I remember that because I was doing a lot of conservation related efforts in Palo Alto at the time. So
Yeah.
Thanks to your dad and the others that worked on that.
I'll share one fun anecdote, which is growing up, I remember knocking on people's doors with my dad to try to get them to vote yes on Prop 20, because that was a big deal. And I got to miss a day of 7th grade to be on the floor, the California legislature, and shake Jerry Brown's hand when he was governor the first time.
Wow.
When it was made into law to create the Coastal Commission. So part of our family history too. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Sandra. We so appreciate you coming. And Rabbi Feder, Dan, we really appreciate you, and our condolences to your family and your mother as well. It always seems it goes that way, where one or two, sometimes two go right in a row. But you are a beloved part of our community, and we thank you for all you do in your civic work as well. With that, we will go ahead and close the meeting in honor of Joseph Badovitz. Moment of silence. And with that, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good meeting.